Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. This is Laverne, well, let me rephrase, Alba Laverne Champion Amaker of A&A Athletics and Vigilance Safety Training Center, bringing to you today, Let's Talk Sports Health. Let's a little background on Let's Talk Sports Health is a segment I was doing back in 2017. And the purpose of me starting that was because I wanted to discuss topics that impacted the sports and overall wellness, health and wellness of the athletes and the sports industry. And the emphasis was definitely, I started traveling a whole lot, going to a lot of youth sports events and so on and so forth. Of course, always at high school events, and college was sports medicine was my passion. And I did that for several years after college and so on and so forth. However, there are a lot of things that I observed as a coach in high school and in the community. When I started traveling, it opened my eyes to a whole lot more things that I didn't realize was happening, which also told me the story and let me get a greater understanding as to why some of my athletes, when they got to high school, did what they did. And so when bringing forth the segment, the key thing was we called it Vigilance, Sports Safety, Protect the Kids campaign. That's what we called it, Protect the Kids campaign, because I realized sometimes our parents and the people that we associate our children with and their journey of being an athlete is always not necessarily the best environment, but because they have the great name, they're that team to be with, because they get the right recognition and this and that, we let them stay. And my mission as a advocate for student athletes and a parent and just a lover of sports, because I do not want this industry to fall apart because of what we do, in the sake of and seek of that scholarship or the sake of wanting to be that well-named team or athlete. So that is what We Talk Sports is about, and it's part of the mission of my vigilance, safety, and awareness. I have tonight, what we're discussing tonight is the relationship between sports and domestic violence. The relationship between sports and domestic violence. Off the top of your head, if you've never heard of it before, you might not think it is a relationship or what the research says. But I have two phenomenal women to help me along with this topic, because again, I am not coming to you as an expert. Now, I'm gonna put that out there right now. I'm not an expert in domestic violence. Let me rephrase. I'm not an expert in domestic violence, but I am an expert in coaching, development, social issues. So I am an expert in some very different ways, but domestic violence as an individual entity alone, I have had experience in that from my students, from clients I have worked with in case management, have had some level of domestic violence. And when we are educators in the school system, we have experienced and we have observed that that's what we get in our classroom. You get a hodgepodge of everything when you start breaking down why Johnny is not doing well, or Sally. So therefore, here we have Anita Davis, Miss Anita
Daniels.
Daniels. I'm
Daniels.
sorry,
Yeah,
Miss Anita
that's okay.
Daniels from the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. The Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. I know a lot of social workers. I have asked them about, did they know about this organization? They're like, never heard of it. And I said, well, you do now. So if you get an influx of new social workers, that's because I said, yeah, find out about it, especially if you have it hanging around and you have children that are athletes too, especially.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
we have Monique A.J. Smith, the president and CEO of Seeds of Empowerment and the Advanced Academy. So I'm gonna have them ladies give insight to who they are as individuals in their career path and what they do, their specialty.
Thank you so much, Alba. I am Anita Daniels. I am a social worker. I've been a social worker for 35 years. Recently joined the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports, probably 3 years ago, because that's when we became an organization. So we are newbies, but we are people who have been involved with sports for a very long time and knew this service needed to exist. So I am one of the founding members of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. I work with current collegiate athletes. I work primarily with athletes from Duke University, also athletes from North Carolina Central University, some former professional athletes I serve. So an opportunity to really get involved with the population. If there are social workers listening or watching who are interested, please visit our website, www.aswis.org, and you can fill out the application and join. And if you want to email me directly, you can certainly do that. I am happy to support you however I can, but athletes are near and dear to my heart. And actually, this story, we'll talk a little bit more as we get into it. But this is really how I got involved in sports, and it was from watching an athlete say he made a certain decision, and I thought he's going to need a therapist. And then a few months later, he kind of had an incident where his name ended up in the news. So that's me.
Yes, okay. Miss Monique?
Well, good evening. I'm Monique A.J. Smith. I am the host of A Chat in the Garden, which is a podcast where I interview African American female athletic administrators and women in sports business. I'm also a former adjunct professor at Hampton University, where I taught psychosociology of sport. I am a 30-year veteran at being an athletic administrator. I began as a sports information director. I've been an interim athletic director at 28 years old. I'm a former social commissioner for the CIAA for 13 years. So many issues have come across my desk. And to be honest with you, I have always looked at sports as how it related to society, because I'm a promoter. I've always tried to figure out how to connect the sports to people to get them to promote and want to come. But since I'm looking at it like that, it also lends itself to look at the other entities of how I can teach it from an administrator standpoint of how to lead better. And that's really what I am now. I'm a leadership strategist for athletic departments and sports business organizations, and individuals who wish to advance an athletic administration, sports business, or take their specialized knowledge into the workplace. So, knowing that this is a resource that I like to discuss, and we're going to talk about it more. But when you can understand how your coaches impact their student athletes, you're able to lead them better, which in turn leads the student better.
Definitely so. All right. Well, as you can see now, based on the three of us as a panel, that leads right into who and how, what our perspectives will be. I, being a high school youth sports organization coach and director, my perspective will come from that, that perspective. Ms. Monique A.J. Smith, she will come from the college perspective, collegiate level, and Miss Anita Davis will come from the sports industry as a whole. I'm going to go ahead and get it started with when thinking about sports and parents putting their students and children in sports, never do we hear the bad things that may come from that relationship. We hear, sports will give you, character education. It will give you friendships. It will give you social skills. It will give you, all this self-esteem. It will give you all these great things. But looking at this particular topic in this relationship, and we don't hear about a lot of the domestic violence that happens until a collegiate player may get caught up in a situation and they might get kicked out. You might see it on the news or quick on the blog or on the Cleary report. something like that. Then you hear from the professional level. But then when you hear read the articles about the professional athlete, it talks about what they experienced when they were a child. You know, what something where they saw this when they were a child, this what happened, this what they learned. And so my thing is now, how are we missing it when they're younger? And what is exactly that we're missing? You know, from my experience, I have there was something very particular back in 2017 when I was out on the circuit. And I was at a football event, and there was this parent. She was berating and letting her child have it. And the more she spoke on, I'm gonna whoop you if you let that player get by you again. I'm gonna beat your tail. And everybody around her they laughing and they co-signing it and whatever the case may be. And I'm in the press box and I'm hearing it. I couldn't take it no more. I left the press box and I went down on the field and I said, ma'am, or sidelines. I said, ma'am, because I saw the posture of the child. He's deflated. And the more she said, I'm going to whoop you, he get by you one more time. I'm looking like, is she really going to whoop him? You know? So the first level of domestic violence is that familial thing, the people that you know. And so here, embarrassment, which is emotional abuse, verbal abuse, because she was cussing at him and everything. I said, ma'am, he's 8 years old. He's 8. I said, I don't know your child like that, but just on observation, the child that he's playing against is just a better athlete. In real simple things. And then the people around began to co-sign with me. And I'm like, I didn't get it. So now, if you look at that, was that him playing the sport, or was that what he was socialized with the family, with the parent doing that to him? You know, we tell the kids, don't cry. So we're putting a lot of things into them as far as them being girlish, especially for the boys. So now, I coach both sides, boys and girls at one point. When I see an athlete, I see an athlete. I don't see a gender, because an athlete is the athlete. It's just basketball is basketball, whether it's girls playing or boys playing. The rules are still relatively the same, except for minor things. So why do we do the gender base? And so I think as we're missing the signs when we see the fact that if a child kicks a helmet, throws a helmet, knock the water bottle over, nobody, just leave him alone and leave her alone, she'll be all right, versus correcting the behavior. These are times we don't correct the behavior. And I'm like, again, me from my experience, I'm like, you better go get that helmet. If you kick it again, that's the last time you're gonna wear it. You know, here, we don't do that here, you know. So is it more the fact that individuals that grow up in environments that allow behaviors like that, and in sports teams and organizations that allow that behavior, is it that? Or so when they become an adult and become that professional athlete and do the same thing, because nobody ever corrected behaviors that were incorrect, is it the sport that did that, or is it the socialization? That's kind of where I see it. So y'all can take it from there.
Well, I will say that it's definitely not the sport. There are some sports, of course, that are pretty aggressive, and that's the way the play goes. But there are also situations where you're right, the familiar, what happens at home can affect that. We call it adverse childhood experiences. So what I'm exposed to in the home can impact what happens when I'm in other environments. I think, and I'm sure Monique will talk about this, but I think this is where we are hoping that coaches will reach out for the additional support that they need. I know you came out of the press box, but it would be nice if, you know, coaches can help parents kind of understand what the expectations are and what they expect from the players on their teams. But when people are exposed to certain behaviors, a lot of times they pick those up. I wouldn't say all the time. There are some children who, because of what they've seen, their attitude is exactly the opposite. Like, I'm
Exactly.
never going to drink, I'm never going to hit
Hmm.
someone, and I don't want to just say it's male athletes, because female athletes fight too. So,
Definitely so.
and there are instances of women who have been abusive towards their partners. And so I don't want us to minimize that. But I think the coaches have to recognize that something is going on and then use the resources like sports social workers to assist them and the families to address the issues when they come up.
Okay.
I had my head down for a minute, because you know me, I love books. And Don McPherson, he is a good NCA friend,
Hmm.
life skills, and he wrote a book, "You Throw Like a Girl: The Blind Spot of Masculinity."
Okay.
All right, and I actually used this book in my class, psychosociology and sport, and I read like the first chapter of what he was speaking about. See, the genders are socialized differently. When you have a little boy, you tell him you're the man in the house, okay? And that's when they stop saying, boys don't cry, okay? And so I had a class of mixture of some football players, and I just said, when did you know that you are masculine? Someone tells you that you are. And so there's something that happens, that triggers in your head. So then when you start playing sports, that's when you can really show your masculinity or your femininity. All right. And I was just watching, and I use a lot of things to teach. I was just watching tonight, Last Chance U. And the season that I'm watching is Coach Brown. And Coach Brown, he uses cursing all doing, and he got a penalty, right? So every from the game previously, he got a penalty and the players got a penalty. And their punishment was to wear a pink shirt during practice and to run. And what does pink shirt represent? It represents being feminine, being a girl. And so you're being penalized for wearing pink, and you're being it's shown that the female is the weaker sex. So, and you're being punished. Okay. So in your mind, pink women, do not ever show your feminine side, because that shows weakness. And that is what happens. You're socialized that way, and you don't even know, unless you really fully aware, mindful of your actions. You just go there and you don't even know how you got there. So you just go back to, that's the kind of thing, because you play like a girl, you throw like a girl. Now, as an administrator, you got to check that.
Hmm.
If you were coached that way, that's fine. But in 2020 and beyond, you can't use any of that kind of terminology. You
Mhm.
can't even, I learned NYSP from Paulette Johnson from Virginia State. You never use push ups as a penalty. You never use physical activity as a punishment.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I mean, because therefore, when you get older, you're not
Has a
running
negative
and
impact.
lifting
Yeah.
weights.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. So it's the same thing. Whatever you use as a punishment, it's going to be always seen as a punishment. It's
Well,
probably why I'm cleaning up now, because clean
no,
up
go
your
ahead.
room. So
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
That's
just
probably
thought
what.
about that. I mean, it's psychological. It's probably why I like to clean up, because go to your room and clean up. You don't even know.
That's fun. So that leads where you just said right into the socialization. That leads back into like this is not a masculinity bashing segment.
Mhm.
When individuals saw the topic, I had like, for real, sis. I'm like, yeah. Because think about this. I think about this also was when most children that need activities to do, they act out behaviorally. What's the first thing they say? Put them in an activity, put them in sports, get them something to do. So, and again, so reading the literature that's associated with this sports and domestic violence being, and they had it was a correlation. I think I left it upstairs. That had a line that said sports, hypermasculinity, toxic masculinity, and then abuse. That it was a causation. So it's a lot of research out there that says that. So I'm like, so you can't have, to me, you can't necessarily have both. You can't have an industry that if you have a child that's already that is acting out, or an individual that's acting out aggressively, you put them in sports to get out that aggression. But then you turn around and say that that's the same thing that caused the aggression. I just don't understand that concept. And I just kind of like, so how do we clear that up and make it make sense? Because again, when people see and they hear it, then it's like, oh, I'm not going to put my child in anything that's athletic because, it might make them violent. Especially the males I know. Do I know males that are aggressive? And yes, they know how to turn it on and turn it off. They say as coaches, we teach them to be aggressive, but we don't teach them how to turn that switch off. So if any athlete has to be able to, you have to have a level of dominance in a sport to be successful. I don't care if it's track. Track is a non-contact sport, but you got to be able to look over at that opponent and know, I'm going to get you. I'm going to smoke you. I'm going to get out on you, regardless. And that's no contact. So it's a mentality that you got to have to say, you deep get within yourself to know that you can push yourself beyond what you think you can do, and then actually dominate somebody else, whether or not it's physical or either just the mental capacity that I'm going to have this swag so strong that I done tricked them before I even ran. You know what I mean? So but we look at football. Of course, football, basketball, hockey, boxing are the primary ones, and Major League Baseball are the ones that seem to show the most level of aggression. And I looked at those sports.
I have to say, just from watching everything, that hockey, that's the most aggressive one because there is a lot of pushing and shoving each other, and I don't even feel I see that same level of contact in football. But I think the important thing to remember, and one of the challenges that I see athletes dealing with now, is that team sports have even become competitive. Like somebody still has to be the superstar. I'm a Lakers fan, and I remember when it was Kareem, and then it was Magic, and then it was Kobe, and now it's LeBron. And it's like, in team sports, are we a team or are we individuals? And so that's the other thing that I think some of the athletes are dealing with. However, I think it's up to the coaches to help the athletes know we are aggressive while we are performing, but it is our performance, and after that it is our responsibility to know how to lay that down. And if athletes are unable to do that, that's when they need to reach out for additional support to find out, like you said, Alva, is something going on in the home? Have they been exposed to certain things and seen certain things that they don't even know how to process? And how do we help them do that in healthier ways, so it doesn't become something that comes off the field or off the court or off the ice or off the track, and now someone is getting injured or ending up in the hospital or in jail?
Yeah. Monique,
I want to add a point. Um, I put a post up about Brittany Griner today or yesterday.
Okay.
There were honoring her for, I guess it was coming out day. And I said, and she was, I haven't heard anything about her in the NBA, WNBA having any problems, but she had problems when she was in college. And I said, this young lady went through a lot. She got into a lot of trouble by knocking the mess out this girl underneath the basket. And they were trying to post up. But I'm going to tell you, it really is. You saw something physical, but emotionally, she has been pushed and pushed in the box. Her father put her out the house when she was a junior in high school. She is recruited for Baylor, okay, which is a Christian institution that have it already on their bylaws that you cannot express that you're a homosexual. But the girl is already a homosexual before she go to college. And they tell her she can't be herself. So here's a second strike. So then you under the basket and you got somebody trying to post up against you. She just got sick of it and she punched her out. Now, I'm not excusing it, but somebody saw there's something else going on with this young lady. And they sent her to counseling. And that's when she started leading her ship. She started being able to see, I have control of my decisions in my life. When she went to the draft, she didn't invite her coach because she realized this person's not on my team. I can have people who's on my team, and then her life went smooth sailing for that. So somebody got to recognize that the violence and the attitude is a lot more to it, and that counseling is what helped her.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, as I say, Monique, I really feel like, and maybe Alva, you do it as well, but someone has got to help educate the coaches on the value. That's the part. If you want your life to be easier as a coach, then you better try to refer some of your people to counseling if that's what they need. Because if you're not trained to handle it, just saying go back out there and do whatever is not going to be the answer, but it's the wonderful opportunity to take advantage of the resource. And at least I know the NCAA is looking at it. They've developed some materials. They have different committees that they have formed. They just recently developed a diverse student athlete summit, and they have a committee now. I served on that. For us to look at the needs of athletes of color. So, the needs are a little bit different, and to recognize that, and then to try to make sure the resources exist for them. And so, but it can't just stop with us. Those of you who work with the coaches and the administrators, you've got to help us show the value of our presence at the table, in the office, wherever, look, in the locker room if we need to be there. But if we can't get in and get to them, and someone's not trained to manage what they are dealing with, what breaks my heart, I still think about that young man that signed on with the school. I think it was in Florida.
You're talking about Bryce.
And, they were homeless.
Yes.
And he
walked in
said
front
to
of the
the
train.
mom, "Are you going to be okay?"
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that broke my heart. All I was
It
thinking
killed
was,
me.
did no one know? And I don't know if it was domestic violence or what it was, but what we know is something was going on, and everybody, it just was like over everyone's head until we heard that this child walked out in front of a train. And then, and it could have been dealt with. And that's the same thing when it comes to the violence. It can be dealt with if the coaches will reach out and say, you need some help, and we need for you to go in order to continue to play on this team. Because one of the things that we're finding is, even with those athletes who end up running into some hardships, the first thing they say is, I wish someone had told me about counseling. I wish someone had told me that there was someone who could help me, because I didn't know what was going on. I mean, they don't understand.
Well, wouldn't it be helpful then, just like you have, I especially look at, coming from an HBCU, you know, you don't have as much manpower around your campus. You have your trainer, you have the coach. You might have a nutritionist floating around there somewhere, depending on the level. But in you know, your top schools, your, you know, SEC schools, and, you know, Big Ten, you know, they have the nutritionist, but even they don't have necessarily a mental health person that's a part of that circle of care. And I always talk about the circle of care. Anytime anybody here talk about athletics, you talk about the circle of care, because it's beyond just the trainer and your teachers and the person that's keeping up with your records to know if you're compliant, remaining compliance. It's like all those individuals that come in contact with you or that you need to have around you to be total, as your overall wellness is beyond, can you tape my ankle up, give me some stem so my quad and my ham is good so I can go back out there and play. It's way beyond that, because working as a trainer in college, yeah, many a time doing stem and putting the ice bag on, athletes have cried right there on that table. Or they telling the situation of them and their girlfriend that they broke up. You know, you became the counselor, unfortunately letting them get it off their chest before they went out there, because they know they had practice and their girl might be out there messing around. But if I go out there, sis, I swear you're gonna do nothing, because you're gonna leave, not gonna leave here, get in trouble, lose your scholarship over somebody that may not even be a part of your life, or supposed to be there for a full season. You know, they supposed to just be there, they're just there for temporarily. All those little things you kind of learn on the fly right then, just kind of like you my brother. So what would I tell my brother to do? That's how I would look at those athletes. And then also I want to think about real quick before we miss this one too, those that are in sports marketing, you know, in the situation that happened in the NFL, because I'm coming also from the trainer perspective, having to be accept what they say, accept the fact that this is a nature of sports, to be verbally abused in the locker rooms, and how they had to battle and stay in there. But then when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know, you speak out. So how do you think women that are in the sports media or have those jobs that are actually in this industry need to manage it better? How can can they do when they coming across verbal abuse, even the domestic violence, somebody pop you on the butt or trap you in the corner, you know, kind of close in on your personal space, and you kind of like, okay, excuse me. And you know, how do you think they can manage it better, you know, before they have to withstand so much to where, like, say, this has escalated way beyond what I expected to do in this career or to maintain their career?
And I think people have to make sure that they remain safe and not get themselves, and it's hard, because it's not, domestic violence is not, definitely not the victim's fault.
Mhm.
And so I think people do have to be mindful of where they are and who they are around, and keep themselves safe. And a lot of times, out of eagerness to have a conversation, or eagerness to have an interview, or whatever it might
Mm,
be, people can put themselves in harm's way. And so I think everyone has to be mindful, because the other thing is that can be flipped. It can go from, I thought I was interviewing you, or I thought I was interviewing with you, to now you are charging me with domestic violence. And so both
mhm.
parties really have to be mindful and think through what are the best ways for us to have some of these conversations where both parties feel safe and both parties walk away feeling like this was the conversation and the meeting we were trying to have,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
not that someone took advantage of someone else or the situation. Because domestic violence, I have to keep saying it, it goes both ways. The only difference is men do not normally say when they are the victims of
Mm,
violence,
exactly.
but they are too. And so I don't want to minimize that. There are men who are victims of domestic violence.
Yes. And I'm glad you keep reiterating that. No, because
Well, from a,
the research, very little research is saying it. You know, even the LGBTQ plus community has a large, major issue in that community, but it's not looked upon. It's glanced over when it should not be.
It should not be.
It
I
should not
agree.
be. And so therefore there again might be another segment because to follow up. Go ahead, Monique.
Well, from someone who was an administrator early on in life, uh, I was 22, excuse me. I was 22 years old and had my very first conference meeting, and a person I thought very well of, and I was only female, they greeted me and stuck their tongue in my ear. And I was in shock, but I didn't tell anybody.
Mhm.
I said, now that I'm not a student anymore, now I'm fair game, what's going to happen? That was 30 years ago.
Wow.
So from that experience, from the beginning on to all of my career, I never not went to something. I always had some students with me. When they were all meet in the hotel room, I would be in the hotel room. They were drinking cognac. I was drinking Pepsi. And so the young lady trying to get the interview, she cannot not go. And the part about being safe is to continue to do the work, because if you do, you just be cut off because they already think, well, she's not going to go. I want to tell you how many men wouldn't hire female SIDs. Well, she's got to travel. You're talking to me. I'm a female. Oh, I forgot you're a female. I said, okay, I get that and I appreciate that, but you cannot hire somebody because you're afraid because they got to travel. You're concerned for their safety. You need to give them the opportunity to say yes or no. So a lot of these things are, and it's about power. It's about power. And then some people think they really are being kind to you by thinking and protecting you. And if you are female in that career path, you got to be able to demonstrate that you can take care of yourself.
Mhm. I agree. I haven't always, while I've been a social worker my whole career, I haven't always worked with athletes. As I said, this has probably been the last 6 years of my life. But when I was a United Way executive, I think about all the men that I worked with from Fortune 500 companies and hospitals, et cetera. But I never had those kinds of experiences. And I'm really kind of surprised as I listened to you. And I was young, I was 26 when I started that job. But I don't know if it was just the way that I carried myself, that it was almost like, don't think about it. But I did not run into that. So when you said that, I know you saw the expression on my face, but I was thinking, what? No one ever did that to me. And it was great that they respected my talent and my skill and my expertise. And I did not have to fight my way out of boardrooms and other places, that I just got to perform the job that I came to perform. So, yeah.
That's
I,
that's awesome.
I do want to add one other piece. When I talk to the student athletes of today, and they even say and agree that they have not been told or taught how to turn on and turn off. And if they say that, that tells you that you they have not been taught, like, levels. It's like I tell them it's like driving a shift. Yeah. When you are auto, you don't have no control over what shift you are. But if you are doing a manual shift, you can recognize I'm a little bit too high. I need to shift this down. You can have your teammates say, look, man, you're going a little bit too far. I mean, let's say from the field to the cafeteria and somebody cuts you in line, you know, they don't know how to not give the same response that they give on the field. And, because they can't see it. So you need to have some coping mechanisms to be able to protect yourself and the people that you're around in society.
Right, true. So now, when with that being said, you say they don't know how to turn on, turn off. Those are conversations that are just kind of, it haven't been taught, right? It haven't been taught. But that goes to at what level again, what level and who's responsible for teaching that? You know, because again, you think about somebody coming up, I teach health education, sex education in high school. Now, we know across the country, that's always a legislative issue about how much will you teach, what you're going to teach, you know, and then so permission. And they just now this year, and I know in our state, have taken off having to give permission for your child to participate. They can opt out if they want to, but you know, or pretty much if they're in there and they don't opt out prior to that unit being taught, then they're taught. So at what point, especially when you got a coach in a coaching situation and you have minors, until they get 18 years old and get to college, they are at that point minors. How many parents might agree to having their child being talked to from someone else other than them? Because again, when you start teaching children and young adults about proper behavior, especially in certain issues, in circumstances and topics, you know, it starts contradicting what they're looking at. And then they start asking questions about what's going on at home, or they start sharing what's at home, and you start opening up a whole nother can of worms. And so who's responsible for teaching that, and when can that be inputted, especially from you looking at an athletic department? Let me think from an athletic department. The way because I got my certification for the coaching boys to men curriculum. That's for high school, young adults, middle school up. And the implementation of it, again, has to fit in somewhere. I'm like, well, if you know you want to be an athlete, when you're doing preseason, it should come in the preseason program. Not when you're in season, because you got 2 hours and two games a week. We know good and well you're not going to you're not even close to thinking about it at that point. But we all have preseason programs, so there are certain things that we need to start adding into preseason programs for athletes to participate. Just like you have to get a physical, some schools require baseline concussion screen. We got to think now, especially the holistic part of, again, the mental health, because athletes are going to be totally different, even coming through once this post-COVID is over. It's a whole nother mentality that these folks are going to have. And so what are we going to bring different than get the practice and win this game? What are we doing? So, and I just think that's where we might need to figure out and then discuss with school officials and athletic directors where to put it in, and bring it in professional social workers, maybe once a month, or have a segment that they could come in with the specialists.
Yes, I was going to say where I think it needs to start occurring, and I think some of my colleagues would agree with me, is around middle school. So sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, because that's when it really kind of becomes more competitive. And people are thinking about playing in high school on the high school team and getting a scholarship and going to college. And so it needs to start at the middle school level, but I agree with you, it needs to be off season. One of my favorite authors, or at least the book that I like that he put together, is Street. And the name of it is Skills for Student Athletes. And what I like about his book is it kind of goes from A to Z, from, looking at your finances to your schedule to dating to how you're going to manage other relationships to stress and drugs and you name it, everything is there. And I think we have to start having these conversations. I do forensic evaluations for the court as well. And when I interview someone who tells me they started smoking marijuana when they were 12 or 13, I am just amazed. And so if they're doing that at 12 or 13, or I have a 14-year-old to tell me, yeah, I got a baby on the way, I'm getting ready to be a daddy. And I'm thinking, you are a baby and you're talking about being someone's parent. And so I think we do need to start, and that needs to be part of the expectation with parents. If your child is going to be in this program, these are some of the things that we're going to be teaching. And it's not just in high school or elementary or middle school and thinking about the school system, but also with AAU and these clubs.
Exactly.
And, it's so much. sports, and some of these parents are, I don't know what to call them, helicopter. It's just, my child is in training twice a week and they're competing and they're on this team and they're on this team. And, and for some families, they can't afford it. And so it's just so much, but it needs to start somewhere. And if it can't start in middle school, then definitely by the time they get to high school, they need to have some expectation of what will occur in college if they continue to play sports, and not end up back home in the community because things went awry and no one helped you see what was going on when you were younger. So I hope we can get to some of these high school associations, to AAU and some of these other um, athletic programs that are recruiting young people very young, and parents are spending lots of money. We need to get a handle on it. We really do.
Well, I would say that when the vigilant safety training campaign was out, was protect the kids, the whole purpose was, prior to that weekend tournament happening, the parents, while the kids are registering, for the coaches are registering the kids for the weekend tournament and picking up their IDs and all that kind of stuff, the parents would have been in one segment with me, or the kids would have came in there, so that all the kids are not just hanging around the lobby or wherever the check-in place was. But of course, when they see that something else messed up on the football side, that everybody might not get certified, they just say, forget that safety stuff. And so it has to be a level of precedence. It has to be a part of, this is how we operate. You can't circumvent not doing this part.
Exactly.
And so, because that should not be the first thing that we take off the slate, something that's going to improve us as a whole. And I definitely think that we could get some ground effect right now, because everything has stopped. When everything stopped, when I spoke with the organization of youth sports organization, the National Youth Sports Organization director, I was like, now that everything has stopped, we got an opportunity to look at it and put it back together correctly. And I said, so if we could do that, it would be wonderful. And now, but making the right connections and partnerships, and saying, when do we layer this in? And that would be phenomenal. And I got somebody that wants to come in, and because definitely I would love to hear a male, because I read something earlier that said that if young men had more female coaches when they're younger, it would eliminate some of the hyper masculinity. What are your thoughts on that? If they had female coaches, because remember, a lot of female coaches, they coach only girls, but you always see males coaching females, but you don't see it a lot of times reversed, especially on the younger side.
We don't see it a lot. And one thing I will say is we're seeing more, is what takes me to the kind of the den mothers for the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts. Sometimes it's a female. And so I don't understand why we can't have female coaches. We're seeing that more even at the collegiate and professional level. We still have a very long way to go. But there are, I'm pleased to see, particularly with the NBA and even some of the NFL teams are starting to pick up some female coaches. But there's a lot still to be done in that area. So I hope we can do that. Monique, I'm sure you have some ideas and some history as well around this area.
Well, I did have on my podcast, I don't know what year it was. She was the athletic director for DC Public Schools, and she had been a high school football coach.
Oh, Wanda Oates.
And
That's her.
Don't give me the line.
That's her.
But I will say, and there was a couple of videos with her and whatnot, and even me talking to my football players. They respect your knowledge. If they have a female coach who knows the game, they will treat them like they would treat any female in their family. They'll be protected, and that is one thing you need to be cautious of. because they'll take the role from coach to this is my mom, this is my sister, this is my aunt, and you ain't, the reason I say that, because being an athletic director, I had that kind of feel. And so if I was having a interesting conversation with someone, the players would rise up. You all right? You all right? I said, I'm good. We're having a great conversation, you know? And so, again, it has to be socialized that it's a role that I am playing. And you got to, that's that part of, don't take it personal, meaning you got to respect the position and not the person who's playing the role in it. So that's a switching of the mind. But as we have more women to gain positions in the NFL, I do believe it will have a trickle down effect.
Absolutely. And I would say even counseling athletes, because I know so much about sports, they love it. When I tell them, oh, all my teams are purple and gold, the Lakers, the Vikings, and ECU Pirates, they're like, yes, Miss D. And I say I was a cheerleader in high school and college. They're like, she gets it. And so that means a lot to them, that you understand the sport that they play and you understand the importance of it. However, also considering that there's more to you than your sport, and helping them learn that about themselves is part of what we think our responsibility is also.
Okay, do you think that athletes that are the, I guess, the more dominant players on the team are more at risk to possibly being in a situation because they have now the expectation, because most people don't tell the superior athlete no, they don't have their level of expectation is that I'm going to get it anyway, whether it's the academic support, somebody going to give them a grade, somebody's going, all the things that happen to the superior athletes, and versus an athlete that is, say, mediocre or just a great supportive player, a member of the team, because that level of expectation is just different for them. So they think, and as well as what they should receive.
I would say they may think that, but it
Mhm.
doesn't always turn out that way. And eventually, if they don't make a turn will be made for them. And I'm sure Monique can speak more about that. So it might seem like, because I'm, quote, the superstar, but even the superstar can run into hardships and difficulties. At some point, you can become more of a liability. And if you are more of a liability, then it's better for someone to let you go than to allow you to bring the entire team, the entire athletic program down. So, and I'm sure, Mo, you've seen a lot of that.
Well, you just got to be cautious of the level of entitlement. And I've seen it in different levels, but it's starting very early because the AAU situation, I've seen it happen very early, and I get it because the parent has invested so much into it. But it's amazing to me because I've been on a collegiate level 30 years, and then just dipping my toe in the AAU world, it is it it's a monster. And so now I can understand. I was a Division I compliance person, and when I was AD, I could now I see how the parents have this level of, I got stake in this, I got ownership. I want to see this, and this, and if you never came in contact with me, I just have a deaf ear and deaf eye to stuff. I'm like, okay, that's you, but this is what it is. I didn't pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they've been doing it since AAU, we we don't have a Loch Ness monster. We got shown enough gorilla on here, the Gazuki, like boom, and how you gonna bring that back down?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Which is again, that is again what happens when we, like say, get into the the the, the high school level, that you have to deal with both. That you have to have your athlete that will put the high school team secondary because we're playing for the whichever AAU team. I hate to say AAU because AAU is an organization and the monster
Ooh.
is the organization. I mean, I just say it's just the entity, but it is what it is. Is that the travel competitive sports world, whether it is soccer, whether it is whatever, but that's the main governing body of, a lot of it that goes on. And it just appears to be, it is a monster. I don't care which sport it is. It is an absolute monster. And then being from the high school level and having to deal with that level of, like say, that level of entitlement, that I don't need to come to that practice because y'all regular. I'm already top over here, and so, but you have to say, if you're going to play here, this is the expectation that you have to go 10 practices before you're going to get that uniform. And then, of course, and then the coach wanting that player because it's going to fill the house. I would love to fill the house too, but I'm not going to let you disrespect your peers. So that goes with that level of respect of the next person. So when as we continue to talk about this, it does bring it's a layered, it's very layered. And when you start peeling back that onion, it's just it's another piece under there, another piece under there. So you like say you got your home that needs to have a level of control. Like I say, when you see that athlete that say they just talk so disrespectful for their mother, who want to just give them the orange or the water. And I know you've seen it at the field house when they might lose and they want to give them the towel. Just go ahead, get off me, kind of stuff. And nobody says anything. And the parent might say, oh, that's just how they do. That's not how they do. Mom, don't accept that. Dad, don't accept that your child talking to your wife like that, or talking to you like that, or allowing the behavior to be explosive like that. And I was just like, what do we do with that? So we got to fix it there. Then we got to embed the support services in the middle, starting at the middle school level. So you got to now still convince the parent to allow it to happen. Put with the coach.
Well, if their child is going to be involved in what would be considered organized sports, then if that's part of the process, then yeah, your child will have to go through whatever these classes are, whatever the expectation is, whatever we need to sign saying, I understand, I agree, and I will honor the rules, regulations, etc. I think that's important. And again, I think it's critical when the coaches and the athletic trainers, and I admire those. I will say, I also did some work with Lewisburg College. Um, but when those coaches saw that something needed to happen, they reached out to me. They didn't wait, or the athletic trainers or whatever. They reach out. And that's what's important is when you see something, say something. Don't wait until, like that. I tell the couples that I work with, you saw that your house was smoldering. Don't call me when it's half burned down and expect me to fix it in one session.
Right.
You saw what was going on. So when you see something, go ahead and do something about it. But I do think it's important for us, and our organization is certainly willing to help organizations look at what kinds of protocols do we need to put in place for children and their parents to be educated about expectations and what kind of behavior is acceptable and how we're going to treat each other. And that's teammate to teammate, that's teammate to coach, that's, all of that, all of that.
Well, there's a resource that was that Reliance. Reliance is and they have a motto that sports can is the next generation to stop, abuse, stop domestic violence. And they currently have a proposal out there for, prevention and awareness programs and things. So I said, maybe it's definitely a way we could collaborate and get out there to, address this issue at all levels. Because like I say, it's very much needed, and it's timely. And it's timely. Now that, again, everybody is paused, and let's take a moment for the calls then.
Exactly.
Let's take a moment for the calls. So I guess we're coming down to the end. I think we shared quite a bit of. There any closing remarks? Any last thing you might want to say to anybody that's watching, was parent, whomever, about this concept or this issue?
I will just say to parents and coaches and trainers, if you see that your child who happens to be an athlete is struggling, for parents, for coaches, for trainers, for nutritionists, for whoever is involved in that athlete's life, please reach out to get some support for them. And I will say, and I know Monique agrees with me, I saw a video recently of some coaches saying, we need some support too. Our families are, we're on the road, we're traveling, so if the coaches need some support, we're there to support them too. But if you see that some of your athletes might be on the wrong path, we're here to help you. Don't wait until the house or the gymnasium or half the stadium is burned down before you reach out and get some support right away, because that can be the turning point for that athlete and for your athletic program.
Mm-hmm. No? Anything?
Well, I feel very blessed. I'm blessed to have had both of these women on my podcast, and I'm just happy to be able to showcase their specialized knowledge. And so, for me, that brings me joy, because you all are needed, and these discussions are needed, and many people don't even know these resources are out there. So I just want to offer that the women that are on the podcast are all different types of positions in athletic administration. And if you would like to follow a Chat in the Garden, feel free to do so at chatinthegarden.com. We're every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And if you just want to get it into your inbox, I would say type 38470 38470 and type seeds, SEEDS, so I can drop that seed in your email every week.
She's such a consummate professional.
She is, isn't she?
Yes, she is. I would say this to anyone listening. It is a layered issue that cannot be done and solved in one discussion. This will take it's a village. This is something that will definitely take a village to address. Because again, of course, they talk about sports events, because on Super Bowl, that's when the rate of the violence goes up. And again, it's they say the event in itself. So we all got to be able to monitor our behaviors and what we're doing that are contributory to the cycle, the vicious cycle that we are in and may affiliate with. We all got to be mindful of what our own behaviors are. And again, see something, say something. I mean, we hear when talk about terrorists. Well, violence in our communities, violence in our families is a terrorist act, because it has the same end result. It has the same end result. Traumatic. It's trauma, mental trauma that we deal with, and we try to figure out, how did I get here? How did I get here? So I just want to wish everybody a good evening. Share to anywhere, any platform that you want to share this to. I will put in some resources, definitely the link to the Social Alliance of social workers and sports. So I'll put that in the tag. I will also put in Reliance and the various other resources that will be available for you that you can get in contact and be able to get help. And again, if you are a coach and you got your own issue, wives of coaches, my husband was a head coach for many years. I always tell the wives, please allow your husband or boyfriend or whatever he is to you to de-escalate. You know, help him. Don't force him out, like forcing him. If he's a coach, let him be able to coach without you texting what time you're gonna be home. Those are contributory behaviors to being able to stress them out. Then they turn around and lose a game. Then they got that pressure. It's not to say it's a cause, but it's contributory. So again, looking at all behaviors that contribute to the situation of violence when it's, and then you don't want to say, you know, it's just related to sports. But let's have a good evening, share, make comments on there, then we know how to follow up on it. But I do want to talk to some coaches and see what they think and see how they can embed support services and what kind of support they want. They say they want support, but then are they willing to compromise some time and practice for something to happen? All right.
Well, my motto is you can pay now or you
pay
can pay
later.
later. If you pay later, it's going to cost you more money.
Yeah,
So
definitely
pay
so.
now. It won't
All right.
cost as much.
All right. And you can text at 38470. Text vigilance at 38470 for any of support service for student athletes and for your risk management, risk assessments for your sports programs, and for the MAP, Minorities Access, Athletics Access Program, to help student athletes know what they can do after they finish their journey of being an initial student athlete. What is that next path? Where they're going to turn that baton over to? And so the MAP program is here to assist with that. Again, 38470, text 38 vigilance to 38470. And with that being said, have a great night. And we're going to